Hi there, it's Ian Cunningham from Vector GB again. With the second in my series of videos on diagnostics with certificate-based and role-based authentication using the new UDS service. And now we're going to look into how this works in Vector Tools. So if you're not sure about the kind of underlying mechanisms for how this works, then please watch the previous video in this sequence where I explain kind of the nuts and bolts of authentication and how it works. So if we think back to the end of that last video, then I talked about the security manager. So here is the Vector security manager. I have imported into this some security profiles, including one for doing UDS with service 29hex29hex. So this is issued by Vector, as we can see in the description here. So this is an internal profile that we use for providing demos. Obviously, you can have many as a supplier, many demos as an OEM, maybe only a couple of profiles to suit you, and then you can use these inside Vector Tools. So I have here a simulation of an ECU using the virtual target in Canoe. So this is a virtualized ECU running with a Canoe abstraction layer. And we can see here it's sending CAN data on this trace that shows all traffic. I have a second trace here which only shows diagnostics, which at the minute shows none. I have a little indicator here that shows the authentication status. So at the minute, we have not done any authentication, so we're in an unauthenticated state. So we have this kind of question mark. And yeah, I can do stuff. I can, for example, turn on the indicators here on my car. So my little car here really does stuff. Over here in Indigo, if I look into the networks setup, I can see I've only put the details for one ECU in, make this a simple demo. And here I have picked the profile for my demo. And I have here a role which I'm using. So I'm using role 2. This corresponds to the development role. And all the other parameterization has then come directly out of the diagnostic description, the CDD file. So if I click OK here, then Indigo will be set up to authenticate as soon as I click connect. So from the user perspective, this is as easy as it can get. When I click connect, we will see the authentication configuration request, this verify certificate, so the certificate unidirectional data, and the positive response to this has the challenge, and then I can see the proof of ownership data being sent by Indigo back to the ECU. So you can see the target here is ECU, and in the trace here, the diagnostic trace in Indigo, I can see there's 700 and something bytes of certificate data, and then just a few bytes of response data to the challenge where I've signed. And importantly, I'm authenticated, so I can do things. So, for example, I can read the status of the direction indicators. I can see the left indicator is on. Hurrah! Diagnostics works. This is good. So that's if I'm authenticated. So there's kind of no surprises here. From a user perspective, I can just do everything just by clicking connect. So what's the difference to normal? Well, let's deauthenticate and try and do the same things. So if I look in the console here, I can explicitly deauthenticate. And now if I come back to the IO control, try to read, I get the warning message here. Negative response, authentication required. So I could, of course, disconnect, reconnect, but within Indigo, Canoe, and Canopy, we have the ability to write diagnostic scripts using vector diagnostic scripting. So I have a script here which will allow me to authenticate. There we go, and I am authenticated again. You can see the script has sent the data as we saw previously with the automatic connection. So this is authentication as development. Let's see what I can't do as development. Oh, I should show you as well. Now I'm authenticated. I can send that request, and again, now I get the positive response because I've authenticated. If I go up to the session control and I try to start the supplier session, I'm a developer, Okay, I'm in the ECU, not the ECU developer. I'm the OEM development tool, and now I cannot do this. I need to authenticate still. I haven't got the right authentication level. I haven't, or the right role. So let me change my role. If I go to the Manage Networks window, and I can find where the role is defined here. It's role 2 at the moment. I will change that to say role 1. We'll click OK, and I can connect and wait for, there we go, the authentication to complete. So I'm now authenticated. You can see actually there's a different amount of data has been transferred, 777 bytes. So there's a different authentication process for the different role, different set of data. And now if I send this, I now get my positive response. So I can see that I have different roles where different things are possible. I can run scripts to authenticate as well, and the configuration process is really quite simple. If we look into the diagnostic data that's in the background, how have we described all this? Well, we have this concept of states within Candela Studio, so state groups. So we may be familiar with session state groups, security, access state groups, the old kind of security concept. And now we have the concept of an authorization state group. So in here, I can be anybody, supplier, development, manufacturing, after sales, EPTI. And as we saw when I kind of first came into Candela Studio, the the state machine here is fairly complex. Of course, there's a lot of transitions here. If we combine this with the fact that also maybe we want to say that particular things we want to do with diagnostics are also linked with a particular diagnostic session. So not only do I have to be authenticated as a supplier, but I also have to be in the supplier session to do something. Then we can see that actually that the manual validation of the order conditions is really fairly complex. So a tool like Canoe Diva, which is another tool we provide from Vector, which is able to consume diagnostic data with this kind of information in and automatically generate the tests and then automatically execute the tests, is incredibly valuable if we start to look at bringing authentication into our ECUs and our vehicles. So how did I know I have 1 to be a supplier and 2 to be in vehicle manufacturers development team? Well, we have this concept of jobs, and this is part of the Candela template. And in here, I have a specification that tells the tester there is something the tester needs to do. It's a task that needs to be done to authenticate to the different levels. And if I select the task to be done with the supplier level, I can see this has a role input data with the value of 1. If I choose development, I can see it has a role input with a parameter of value of 2. So this is how I knew that I needed this. Of course, you may choose a different way of doing this. You may have a source that only gives a single way to authenticate and only gives a single role. But if you have a multi-role, this is possible. So this tells the tester that it's something to be done, and this is the data that needs to be provided to the job that does the security stuff. And of course, you may have more than one parameter. You may also have output parameters, perhaps, and all of that can be specified in this window here. But then from this point onwards, the kind of definition of dependencies and rights within there is the same as with any other state group in Candela Studio. So I can see that there are things that only a supplier is able to do. So writing serial numbers, for example, is only possible for a supplier. Doing the ECU name writing is only possible for a supplier. So this is this kind of concept of relatively coarse-grained security still, but with roles rather than with security levels and with authentication with a certificate. Join me in our 3rd video to have a summary of everything we've seen and a bit of a recap and some further thoughts on what's possible. Thank you very much.